Marcus Ellison grew up in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, in a neighborhood where dreams often felt unattainable, but they never stopped being dreamed. His mother, Mary Ellison, worked long hours as a nurse while his father was a distant memory. He'd left when Marcus was just a toddler. However, Mary raised Marcus with a fierce sense of pride in their roots, never letting him forget where he came from, and teaching him the values of hard work and determination. Growing up, Marcus was captivated by the stories of his great-grandmother, who had been a prominent activist during the civil rights movement. His mother often told him, "It's not about where you start, Marcus. It's about what you do with what you have." These words resonated with him and planted the seed of something far greater than he could imagine. He would build a business that not only served a purpose, but also told a story. He would be a part of his community's legacy. The idea started small, as many great ideas do. One afternoon, as Marcus was working his shift at a coffee shop in downtown Atlanta, he had an epiphany. He realized that coffee was not just a drink for people, it was a shared experience, a moment of connection. But more importantly, it was an opportunity for storytelling. The rich history of Black culture in America could be woven into every cup, and he could do that through his very own coffee stand. With this idea in mind, he set out to create something that would transcend mere coffee. It would become a cultural institution. Marcus began by gathering ingredients, experimenting with roasts, and researching the legacy of coffee in Black culture. He learned about the Black communities that had, for centuries, been involved in the coffee trade, from the Caribbean to the streets of Harlem. He envisioned his stand not as a typical coffee shop, but as a hub for cultural exchange, a place where Black history could be celebrated in every sip. Simone, his best friend and a budding graphic designer, was the first person he told about his dream. She listened intently and, without hesitation, said, "Let's do it. I'll help design your logo and create your branding." Together, they began the hard work of turning his vision into reality. It wasn't easy. There were many sleepless nights, budget constraints, and setbacks, but they pushed forward, fueled by a shared belief in what they were creating. The name was simple yet powerful: Ellison Grounds, a tribute to Marcus's mother, who had worked tirelessly to provide for him, and to his great-grandmother, who had fought for the freedoms they now took for granted. The name was a symbol of family, history, and resilience. Marcus and Simone knew that if they could make this stand work, it wouldn't just be about selling coffee, it would be about creating a movement. The journey to get Ellison Grounds off the ground was challenging, but it was also incredibly rewarding. They found a small space in an old bustling corner of Atlanta and set up their stand. There were no grand openings, no flashy advertisements, just the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the warmth of a community gathering, and a dream finally coming to life. Marcus was living his dream, but he didn't realize it yet. All he knew was that every morning, when the sun began to rise, he'd be ready to serve, and he'd be doing it for more than just himself. The first few months were hard. Despite the quality of the coffee and the unique cultural experience Marcus was offering, business was slow. There were a lot of empty mornings where Marcus stood at his stand, staring at the streets in front of him, hoping for just one person to stop by. Simone encouraged him, but even she could see the weight of doubt settling in his eyes. His dream was starting to feel more like a burden. One morning, as Marcus prepared his coffee for the day, a local food critic named Tanya Jensen approached the stand. Tanya had built a reputation for discovering hidden gems in Atlanta's food scene, and she had heard about Ellison Grounds from a friend. She was intrigued by Marcus's concept, but skeptical. "What's so special about this place?" she asked as she sipped her coffee. Marcus smiled and leaned against the stand, wiping his hands on his apron. "It's more than just coffee," he explained. "It's the story of my family. It's about the resilience of Black culture, of the sacrifices our ancestors made. Every cup tells a story." Tanya paused, considering his words. After a few moments, she nodded and said, "I'll be back." That afternoon, Tanya posted a glowing review of Ellison Grounds on her blog, calling it a hidden treasure with a soul. The review went viral, and soon Marcus's stand was flooded with customers. The line outside the stand grew longer every day. People began to talk about the unique experience of drinking coffee that came with a story, a history of struggle, strength, and triumph. Marcus's story and his vision for creating something more than just a business began to spread beyond Atlanta. Social media exploded with hashtags like number Ellison Grounds and number Black coffee culture. But as his customer base grew, so did the challenges. The demands were higher, and Marcus knew he couldn't do it alone. He hired a few part-time employees, all of whom were young, passionate, and had a personal connection to the mission behind Ellison Grounds. They believed in the brand, in the idea of giving back to the community, and in elevating Black culture. With their help, Marcus began to scale his operations, but it wasn't without its sacrifices. One evening, as Marcus was closing up the stand for the night, he received an unexpected call from a larger corporation interested in buying the rights to Ellison Grounds. It was an offer he had been anticipating, but he wasn't sure if he was ready to sell. The idea of turning his dream over to a corporation made him uneasy. He knew that if he sold out, the soul of Ellison Grounds, the history, the culture, might be lost in the process. But at the same time, the money could provide the resources to expand, to grow, and to reach more people. Marcus spent sleepless nights weighing his options. He was torn between staying true to his roots or taking the offer and expanding beyond his wildest dreams. His thoughts were interrupted when Simone, noticing his unease, asked him point blank, "What does your heart say?" Marcus paused and smiled. "It says we're not done yet," he replied. "Ellison Grounds isn't just about coffee. It's about our story, our people. I can't sell that." It was one of the busiest days at the stand when Marcus received a call that shook him to his core. His business partner, Ethan Wallace, a man who had been helping Marcus navigate the corporate side of things, had just sold the intellectual property rights to Ellison Grounds to a major coffee chain. Marcus felt like the ground beneath him had cracked. His vision, his identity, everything he had worked for, was being taken away in a single transaction. Ethan had made the sale without consulting Marcus, believing it was in the best interest of the business. "Marcus, this is business," Ethan said over the phone. "We need this deal to grow." But for Marcus, this was personal. The story, the culture, the very heart of Ellison Grounds was being sold to a corporation that didn't care about the community it was meant to serve. In the days that followed, Marcus became increasingly withdrawn. The pressure of the betrayal weighed heavily on him, and the dream that had once been so clear seemed to be slipping away. He couldn't just sit back and let it happen, but he didn't know where to begin. Simone, who had been by his side from the very beginning, refused to let him quit. "You're not going down like this, Marcus," she said. "You've built something too important." The turning point came when Kenya Brooks, an influential activist and artist, reached out to Marcus. Kenya had been following Ellison Grounds' journey and wanted to collaborate on a project that would showcase Black artists, poets, and musicians in the cafe. "You have a platform," Kenya told Marcus. "It's not just about coffee. It's about representation, culture, and resistance. You've already sparked a revolution, Marcus. Now it's time to take it to the next level." Marcus realized that Kenya was right. The fight was never just about coffee. It was about his community, his culture, and his people. He decided he wasn't going to let the corporation take his dream. With Kenya's support, he began organizing protests, calling for a boycott of the coffee chain that had stolen his idea. The community rallied behind him. They weren't just fighting for Marcus. They were fighting for every small business that had ever been overlooked, for every story that had been stolen. As the protests gained momentum, the media took notice. News outlets picked up the story of the man who refused to let a corporation erase his identity. People began flooding social media with posts in support of Marcus, using the hashtag #JusticeForEllison. Marcus knew he had a long battle ahead of him, but he was ready. He wasn't just going to reclaim his brand. He was going to show the world what it meant to fight for your story. Marcus's life was changed the day Simone rushed to him with a trembling phone. Simone was breathless, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Kenya Brooks just shared you," she said. At first, Marcus didn't understand. "What do you mean, shared me?" he asked. Simone handed him the phone. On the screen was a viral video of Kenya Brooks, one of the most influential Black influencers in America. She was an activist, an artist, and well known for supporting independent projects. The video showed Kenya passionately speaking about Marcus's story, his struggle against corporate exploitation, and the importance of preserving cultural integrity in business. You've created something bigger than just a coffee stand, Kenya said in the video. You've sparked a movement. We need to support him. We need to fight for our culture, for our stories. Ellison Grounds isn't just a business. It's a symbol of resistance and pride. The video went viral in a matter of hours. Posts flooded social media, celebrities voiced their support, and news outlets began covering the story. It was a moment of unity, and it was precisely what Marcus needed to fuel his fight. The community was behind him, and it wasn't just his battle anymore. It was a collective effort to protect what was rightfully his. The breakthrough came when a famous activist lawyer, Ayana Reed, reached out to represent him. Ayana, known for her advocacy for intellectual property rights in marginalized communities, was deeply moved by Marcus's story. She saw it as more than just a legal issue. It was a case of cultural appropriation. They didn't just steal your brand, Ayana told him. They stole your story, your identity, your legacy. We're going to take this to the courts, Marcus. Her words reignited Marcus's resolve. This was a fight he couldn't lose. Simone, too, stepped up. She redesigned the Ellison Grounds logo, emphasizing the historical significance behind it. She began working with artists to create murals that represented the legacy of Black Americans in the coffee industry, and more importantly, the resilience of a community that refused to be silenced. The logo was no longer just a design. It was a symbol of their struggle. For the first time in weeks, Marcus began to believe that this could be more than just a legal battle. It could be the catalyst for something much bigger, something that would reshape how businesses viewed Black culture. It was no longer about one man's dream. It was about reclaiming what had been taken. After weeks of preparation, the day of the trial finally arrived. Marcus, Simone, Ayana, and their legal team walked into the courtroom with their heads held high. The opposing side, the corporation that had taken Marcus's brand, was represented by a team of high-powered lawyers. The contrast between the two sides was stark. One side was driven by profit, the other by purpose. The courtroom was filled with tension as Ayana stood to make her opening statement. She spoke with passion, her words cutting through the air like a blade. "This is not just about a trademark violation," she began. "This is about the theft of a culture, the appropriation of a community's identity, and the exploitation of a Black entrepreneur who dared to dream. This case is about justice." Marcus took the stand, his voice steady as he recounted the painful journey that had led him here. He spoke about the history of his family, the sacrifices his mother had made, and how he had created Ellison Grounds not just as a business, but as a tribute to the struggles and triumphs of Black Americans. As he spoke, his eyes locked with those of the jury, and he knew he was making them understand. On the other side, the defense argued that Marcus's brand wasn't truly unique. They claimed that the similarities between his stand and their products were coincidental, and that Marcus had been lucky to create something that resonated with the public. But Ayana was ready. She countered with evidence, social media posts, interviews, and testimonials that showed how Ellison Grounds had become a cultural phenomenon long before the corporation had entered the picture. Simone's testimony was equally powerful. She spoke about the early days of Ellison Grounds, how they had worked tirelessly to build something meaningful, and how they had never compromised on their values. The jury was visibly moved. The trial lasted for weeks, and each day, Marcus's faith in the process grew stronger. He had come a long way from that small corner stand, and now his story was being heard in courtrooms and living rooms across the nation. He wasn't just fighting for his brand. He was fighting for the future of Black entrepreneurship. The trial lasted for weeks, but when the verdict finally came down, it was clear Marcus had won. The judge ruled that the corporation had indeed violated Marcus's intellectual property rights. Ellison Grounds would keep its name, its brand, and its cultural identity. The corporation was required to pay damages, and the theft was acknowledged in front of the public. The moment the verdict was read, the courtroom erupted in applause. Marcus, his heart racing, sat still, as if the weight of everything that had happened had finally sunk in. He wasn't sure if he believed it at first, but then he saw Simone, Ayana, and his team smiling, their faces full of pride. The struggle had been worth it. In the days that followed, Marcus and his team celebrated, but the work wasn't done. The victory was sweet, but it was only one chapter in the larger story of Ellison Grounds. The next steps were about scaling the business, expanding into new markets, and, most importantly, staying true to their mission. For Marcus, the most important thing was to ensure that Ellison Grounds remained a platform for Black culture and history. The brand had become much more than just coffee. It was a movement. And Marcus was determined to keep it growing, to keep pushing the boundaries and to keep building something that could make a real difference in the world. 3 months after the verdict, Marcus's life had changed in ways he never imagined. The stand was still standing strong, but the impact had rippled far beyond that small corner in Atlanta. Ellison Grounds had expanded to new cities, and the story was being told on stages all over the country. But Marcus hadn't forgotten where it all started. Now he was back at the stand, brewing coffee and talking to his customers, just like he had done when he first started. But things were different. He wasn't just serving coffee, he was serving a community, and he wasn't doing it alone. He had built a network of young entrepreneurs, artists, and activists who were all working together to ensure that Ellison Grounds would always stay true to its roots. One day, a little girl walked up to Marcus at the stand with her mother. The girl pointed to him and said, "Mom, that's the man who started our coffee shop." Marcus bent down and smiled. "You can do this too, just like me." That was when Marcus realized that his true victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the eyes of the future generation. The story of Ellison Grounds was far from over. It was just beginning. Marcus had not only fought for his legacy, but had ignited a flame that would inspire generations to come.